Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Cody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we have a special guest on, Alex Lynd. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course.
So I am back in the Los Angeles studio, and it is hot as hell here. So if you hear a little bit of extra noise, that's because we have fans on, but it's exciting to be back in Los Angeles because I get to see some really interesting projects. And this is one that I think is really cool because it only requires a very cheap, very common microcontroller in order to get started. And it has some privacy implications that many people might not have thought about. Alex, you want to talk a little bit about what your project is and why people might find it interesting?
Yeah, so the ESP bug I initially developed as like a proof of concept to see whether or not you could detect if people like come in and out of an area. So the way I approach this is it essentially detects for Wi-Fi activity coming from your cell phone or other device you might bring with you. And basically using the ESP 8266 in monitor mode, it'll just pull in like a whole stream of data, detect like what devices are nearby, and then it'll push that to a remote web interface I developed where you can parse through and look at packets, device type, and other things of that sort.
So this is kind of like an implant where basically it's designed to be small and inconspicuous and report back to, a hacker or the attacker, or whoever this is, a third party through a web interface. So that person could be, thousands of miles away potentially. And if you were to maybe receive this object in the mail and plug it into your home, that person would then be able to see, activity of people in the home, like coming and going, provided it had a source of data. So how is it actually getting the information out? Like once it actually maybe does a scan and detects like a certain device is nearby and that's, the target. We're like, okay, well the target's home. How does it actually alert the hacker or the, whoever's running this that, all right, the target is nearby?
So of course I talked about the web interface. So it's going to have, the way I partitioned it, you can see networks, you can see clients, and then you can see known devices, which you can save by MAC address. So basically what it's doing is the ESP 8266 is in monitor mode, and it's just pulling in raw Wi-Fi packets, which you can parse through. And basically you can see like where the source MAC address is and what like destination it's sending to like determine whether or not it's part of a network or if it's just like a client nearby that's sending out probe requests or whatever. And that's how we can use it to pinpoint what sort of device we want to track.
So this also does require a little bit of stuff in order to work as fully intended. So one example is this needs a data network in order to actually send the data off-site. So let's say that we had some really interesting information. We were able to find out that a particular employee at this, really intense company is coming and going at a certain time. And that's relevant for us. Well, that's great, but we still need to get the data out of the environment that this has been planted into. So this project actually will connect to Wi-Fi and push the data over a Wi-Fi network. So if you were able to hack the Wi-Fi of an organization and then get the password of that, or even just know the password to a network nearby, or maybe there's even an open network nearby, then you would be able to have this device surreptitiously reporting back over that Wi-Fi network, because it doesn't just listen, it also transmits over Wi-Fi the information to this web interface. So that's how it's actually getting there. And there is kind of the requirement that you would need some sort of data network, either, again, a victim Wi-Fi network whose password you've hacked, or I guess you could provide your own data network to it if you wanted to use like a directional antenna or like extend a network that way. Either would work.
Yeah. Another method that I've implemented, just like as a backup, it also comes with a little SD card reader. And since it's in the D1 Mini form factor, these come with like little hats, which are just like hardware modules that you can stack directly on top. So as like a modular approach, you can buy an SD card hat that just mounts like right on. You can put it inside of something like as small as this wall charger. This is actually what I used for the implant. And you can just solder the two together. They fit in there. You could hypothetically go back and retrieve the data at any time.
Right, so if you wanted to determine whether a certain person's device was, and this is really what we're tracking, right? We're tracking cell phone Wi-Fi signals, because this is a Wi-Fi chip and we're using it to detect interesting signals from maybe someone's smartphone or maybe another device they carry with them. And that's how we're figuring out, the presence. These people aren't like microchipped with coronavirus vaccine. They're just regular people with smartphones who are putting out cell phone signals as they walk around. Now, Alex's project is going to be sniffing those signals, and if there's a particular person that you're interested when they come and go from a certain location, well, once you figure out what their cell phone kind of looks like from a Wi-Fi perspective, you can be alerted anytime that person is near. Now, there's a couple instances when this is really useful, and those would particularly be if there's maybe only a single person that's going to be in the area, maybe, for example, someone's office. Then this would be a useful implant to put in just because it could detect any strong signal, meaning the device is in the same room, to let you know that someone is present. It gets a little bit more complicated if the scenario is, there's a bunch of different people that you all need to identify. But theoretically, this is still possible through Alex's management interface, because once you determine what someone's phone's MAC address is, you can basically start tracking them and watch when they come and go, or even when the signal gets really strong, like they're in the same room as the implant. Now, can you explain what a MAC address is and how we can use it to identify an individual phone?
So the MAC address is just the media access control address of your device, and this is basically just a unique address that every Wi-Fi device, or I think even Bluetooth or other things have too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just an address that's completely unique to your device. So we can use this to pinpoint or discern like when a specific person or device is in the area if we have their hardware address.
Right, so there's actually a funny history to this where I think it was like grocery stores and department stores. I think it was actually mostly department stores started using this technology as soon as smartphones with Wi-Fi became widespread. It really started becoming easy to track their customers, store the data, and sell it. And it was interesting to see that it actually became a market of selling this data and tracking people via their cell phones, so that these department stores would know when their customers were coming in. It was really kind of invasive, and if independent grocery stores or department stores can track you, then it means it's pretty easy for other people to track you as well. So eventually phone manufacturers got together and decided that something needed to be fixed about this, and tried to come up with some things that would make tracking people via their MAC address a little bit more difficult. Now, if you have a phone like Alex that's on Android 8 or below, just from our tests, it's not even an option to do anything about that. You're basically stuck with the hardware MAC address, and there's a couple things that might happen, like when you're not connected to a Wi-Fi network, your phone might automatically randomize that MAC address occasionally, maybe every time you restart, or maybe every minute or so, according to what manufacturer you have. Android phones have a lot of fragmentation, so often the manufacturer like Samsung or someone else might program in a certain behavior. Now, what we typically see here is some attempt to protect you when you're out and about walking around with your phone. Like if you're not connected to a Wi-Fi network, then there's no reason to give out your real MAC address, right? Well, it turns out if you are using this implant in an area where your target connects to Wi-Fi, this will actually get rid of most of that protection on most phones. Because as soon as it connects to a Wi-Fi network, it's supposed to be using a consistent MAC address, because that allows for things like MAC address blacklisting or whitelisting. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so, blacklisting would just be where you can block out certain MAC addresses from connecting to your network. Whitelisting would just be, I think, giving them permission to authorize connection?
Yeah, it's the opposite. So like if you have a network where everyone is banned unless they're explicitly allowed, that would be what a whitelist is. So if you set up a whitelist on your home network, you're like, cool, now nobody can connect without my permission, and your phone just used a random MAC address every time it connected, that would be confusing. So Windows laptops actually have solved this by assigning a randomized MAC address per Wi-Fi network. So they'll always use the same, now I guess, pseudo-random Wi-Fi MAC address every time they connect to the same network, but they'll use a different one if they connect to other Wi-Fi networks. So there's all sorts of ways that manufacturers have tried to limit the sort of tracking we're talking about today. But really, this is fundamentally super useful when maybe there's a single Wi-Fi network someone's going to connect to, an office with a single person, or otherwise just situations where you want to know when a particular device or group of devices are nearby. So, Alex, can you think of any other limitations that are inherent in this process? Oh, no 5 gigahertz. That's one thing.
That's the biggest one.
Yeah, these chips are 2.4 gigahertz only. So if you're looking to do like 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi hacking stuff with this, unfortunately, it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think one of the biggest problems that I overcame was looking for, you could filter by packet type instead. So like if someone did randomize their MAC address, and you know they're going to be like within scope of a certain area, you can basically like pinpoint which device it is that's emitting like certain packets. So like if it's emitting probe requests, but you're just seeing like a different device emitting it every time, then you could know that there's like randomization going on, and that it's pretty much going to be like the only device in the area that'd be emitting it.
Okay, so you could still kind of track devices that are randomizing their MAC address just by like looking for other characteristics. And
Yeah.
it's also kind of worth pointing out that modern Android phones that are fully updated, like my Google Pixel, will actually allow you to select an option that fully randomizes their MAC address every time. Of course, this will mess up any blacklist or whitelist, but at the same time, this behavior is really useful and cool because it will, in some cases, frustrate the sort of tracking we're going to be showing off today. So Alex, in order to follow along or to do this project, what would someone need for the hardware side?
So you would just need an ESP8266, like this D1 Mini I have, and I like this form factor the most because, as I said, they're modular. They come with different attachments you could slam on top. And then you would also just need a micro USB cable, like this one that has a data line on it, and that's pretty much all you need, unless you want something you can also implant it in.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So the data line is important because if you try to do this project and it just like isn't working, the number one cause of that is a cable that doesn't have a data line. It's a power only one. And we've been through this many times. So we point that out just because if you are trying to follow along and you're frustrated because nothing is working, it's probably just a USB cable that has power only. So you might just try USB cable before you get frustrated and assume that this thing is totally broken. So what about on the software side? For the web interface, how would someone go about setting this up?
So the web interface, well, of course, the web application is going to be hosted on some sort of server. So there's two approaches you can take to it. If you're going to be running the ESP bug on like your local network and you only want to see like when someone comes in and out of somewhere that you have control of, you can host it locally, like on your computer, on a Raspberry Pi, some other sort of thing that's able to host a website. Or if you want to remotely implant this, like say in an office somewhere, you can use a web hosting service like AWS or OOO web host, something like that, to host this website, and just have just point the ESP8266 to that domain name, and it'd be able to upload data to it.
Cool. Okay, so that's relatively simple, and hosting it on a local server seems like probably the most basic option for someone who just wanted to go ahead and try this on their own.
Yeah. I actually created, I don't think I have the bash script on here, but I have like all the complete installation instructions on the GitHub page for this project. So if you wanted to follow along, it'd be at github.com/alexlynd/ESP Bug.
Cool.
And
Well,
we'll delve into that.
maybe we should just go ahead and jump to your screen and we can start going through the setup process.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. So on your screen, let's first go to the just the GitHub if people want to go here too.
Yeah.
We'll scroll to the top.
Okay.
And yeah, so you can follow along. The GitHub is Alex Lynd and then /ESP-bug. And yeah, okay, take it from here.
Yeah.
Oh, if possible though, maybe you can enlarge the font a little bit. Like
The
Control-Shift+++. Yeah, cool.
Okay,
Perfect.
sweet.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to start by cloning this repository. So this is like all the stuff we're going to need for the project. We have bug, which contains the files for the ESP. And we have web that just contains the web server files.
I like the description. It's all stuff.
Yes. Okay, so you're going to want to start by running git clone https github .com/alexlynd/ESPBug. Assuming that you already have Git installed on your computer, and I'm running Ubuntu here, which has Git pre-installed, but I'll show you how to install that after. Yeah, so if you don't have Git, you can just install it, I think, with sudo apt install Git, just as a prereq. But
Oh yeah, I know that.
installed.
I've been shocked by like some Kali Linux installs like don't
Yeah.
have it installed by default.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
And then I'm just gonna change directories into where the ESP bug is stored.
And can you enlarge that one a little bit too?
Yes.
Cool. Sweet.
It's kind of big. Okay, so here we can see the same directory structure that's on the GitHub here. So if I go under the web folder, let's see, web. you can see that we have a whole plethora of files here for the website. So index.html is the one that's going to be pointing towards our locally hosted file. Oh shoot.
Mm.
So I'm going to start by setting up, what is it? Okay, so I forgot. Another prerequisite you need to have is you have to have Nginx installed, which is the server engine that we're going to be running. So there's a few alternatives you can use. There's ones like Apache, Nginx. I don't know if you know of any other web
Those
servers.
are the two I usually see.
Yeah. So you can start by just installing that with sudo apt install nginx. I prefer that one because it's like lightweight. It works for pretty much everything. But here you can see I already have it installed, so there's no need to do that. And then after you have nginx installed, you're also going to need to install PHP, because this is using that as pretty much the backend to serve the website to interface with data that's being sent over Wi-Fi.
Okay.
So you can just copy this command here from my GitHub page and paste that over. And of course, I already have that installed, so that's going to work fine. And then another thing you're going to want to do is just check which version of PHP you're running. That'll be useful for later when you have to run the config files. So I'm running 7.4.3. We don't need to note that last number. And after you have the web server installed and PHP, you will need to basically point to where the web server files are stored for the ESP8266, for the ESP bug. So I'm going to run this config here, sudo nano, and that'll throw me into this file that comes with nginx.
Okay. So this is specifying like which port it's going to report back to and all that stuff?
Yeah, so this is just going to be the config file for where nginx knows to look for the ESP bug files. So like the web server stuff. So it comes with a default config, but you can basically just copy and paste this one that I have set up here. This is like all the stuff that it'll point towards. The PHP version from earlier, that's important to note also, that'll be down here. So if you're running like a newer or older version of PHP, you might have to slam that in there. And then also some other things I added, it has to know where to point to find the main file, which is the index file I mentioned earlier, which will be up here. So since I already have this file all set up, I wouldn't need to repaste that again, but you can find that on that page. And then after you've edited the file so it knows where to look for the configuration, you can just simply reload nginx by running sudo service nginx reload, and that'll just restart it in the background.
And now it's running locally?
Yeah.
Cool.
And then also, I forgot to mention another part. The root is also going to be another part of the config you're going to have to change. So you're going to want to point that locally to where the files are stored. So earlier the repository I cloned is going to be at /home/alex/ESP Bug. And I can output that, Control O, Control X.
So would that be the only thing you need to change, just making sure it's pointing to the correct directory?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then of course I would have to reload after that. So that way it knows where to find the files. And then I think if I just go to localhost, it should be running.
Forbidden.
Oh,
But
no.
I mean, something's there.
Yeah. Okay. Since I don't want to change the permissions right now, I know I have another copy of that saved, so I can just revert over to that. Let me just check real quick. What's that? Okay, so it's at remote Wi-Fi bug. That's basically the same thing. Alright, and then I can run sudo service nginx reload, and if I go to localhost, it'll go.
Maybe a new tab? Still forbidden.
That's strange. Let's try that. Okay.
Hey, okay, cool.
Okay, so it turns out it was a nested directory under the thing I had. So I had to add -web because that's where the web files were stored. Okay, and right now it's showing cached information, so these aren't completely accurate. So I can just get the ESP bug up and running real quick. So I'll pop that into.
And of course, this is assuming it's already flashed, which will also show.
Yeah, we can show that real quick. So I'm going to be opening the Arduino IDE, which is used to flash the ESP8266. And all the files you're going to need for this can be found in the repository that I cloned. It's taking a sec.
And Arduino IDE is also requires a little bit of setup. So once you get that installed, you also have to install, or you also have to put like a JSON address and then like install the ESP8266 board in order to be able to work with it. So just a couple other prerequisite steps you have to do.
Yeah, so there's a few setup things you would have need to done before. I'm not sure why that's not opening, but okay. So I can do control open, and it's going to be under the repository I cloned, which should be at ESP Bug. And then here we have 3 folders. It's under bug, bug.ino, which is...
Okay, cool. So it's an image file for the ESP.
Yes.
Cool.
Okay. So this is basically just all the code that the board is going to be running. The only thing you really need to swap out is the server name so it knows where to point to, and also the credentials for the network that you're going to be connecting to. So here you can see we have credentials that are not for this network. So I'm going to plug these in.
Do you remember them?
I do.
Wow. Okay, cool.
Yes. So
just don't say them out loud because we're going to have to blur them probably.
Okay. So we plugged in our Wi-Fi credentials here. So under net, you obviously plug in your network name. Under password, you're going to just put the password. And then server name is where you're going to want to point the ESP bug towards. So you have to find out either the domain name of the server that's going to be hosting your code, or since mine is locally, I just need to find my local IP address on the network. So after this thing connects to my Wi-Fi network, it's basically just going to be sharing like the same IP range of everything else on the network. So I can just plug in a local IP here, which is going to be this computer, and direct it towards just where the code's going to be running.
Okay.
So if I wanted to find that, I can just open up a terminal and type ifconfig. And under here you can see it's dumped out my IP address, which is 192.168.1.89. So I could do Control-Shift-C to copy that. And then just paste that over here. And you can see it's pointing at port 80, which is going to be HTTP / all this. This has changed. So it's going to be under /web. And then if we look at the file structure of ESP Bug, one of the important files that it's running is submit.php that basically will handle when it'll basically handle when files come in and know where to serve it towards. So we're gonna have that.
Do you think you could enlarge the font a little bit?
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Okay, sweet. So after that, I can just flash that to the board and we should be good. So I'm going to select under boards ESP8266 and the particular form factor is going to be the D1 mini. And then I'm going to make sure it's connected also to the correct port. So that's the only device connected right now. And it should be good to flash. And it takes a while to compile.
So what are these? Are there some like hard-coded ones?
Oh yeah, this is initial code that I never bothered to remove but I wanted to implement a feature where it could detect known devices like within the code itself, like on when it's flashed here. But that was too cumbersome, so eventually I just implemented a feature on the website where you could
like
look for
flag
known
it yourself.
devices. Yeah.
Got it. That's cool, because otherwise you would have to reflash it every time
Yeah.
you identified a new
Yeah.
device. Hard
Okay,
resetting
so
your-
it's done uploading,
Cool.
and let me just monitor if it's giving any output, which I can do using screen. So I think it was on /dev/tty.
Yeah, or you can press Command Shift M in Arduino and not be so brave.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Right? Yeah.
I forgot that's a feature.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have to select the correct baud rate and then usually like restart it once, but it should work.
Okay, let me see what serial baud it's running. Serial baud begin 9600.
Instead of 1152.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay.
Cool.
So
connecting. All right. So it's successfully flashed and looks like it's trying to do its thing.
Yep.
Connected to Wi-Fi network. Got its IP address, and then it got a response code 200. What is that?
So 200 just means that the post request, which is like the Wi-Fi data that's being sent to submit.php, it was received, and 200 is a good code. That means everything's good.
What's a bad code?
Like 404.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Sick. Okay, so I'm going to keep that monitor open. So actually one of the drawbacks to using this is, since it's not like dual radio, this thing can only do one function at a time, so it can only be like scanning or uploading. And it has to do those like intermittently. It can't just pull in data and upload at the same time.
Right, because it's got one antenna, so you can only do one thing at a time. That makes sense.
So what it has to do is, for like 30 seconds, I have it pull in a whole bunch of data. It stores it into a little JSON file that's stored locally. And then after those 30 seconds, oh no, crashed a little.
It's giving a little like fee. Cord dump. That's great.
Wonderful. Okay, so it's reconnecting. So it'll pull in that data for about 30 seconds, store it into a file on here, and then it'll push the upload to the web server. So you can also change that upload frequency if you're pretty confident that it'd be able to capture devices within that time frame. So about like every 30 seconds or so, this web page is going to refresh with new data.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So then from this interface, you're able to see all the data that it's pushing in. You're also able to manipulate it a bit. Can you show like what you would do to once you have a good idea what someone's device is in terms of manufacturer or something like that, how you might be able to then flag it or otherwise start watching it?
Yeah, so one of the features on this web interface is you can see the manufacturer of the device based off their MAC address. So I can scroll through. Also, this is separated by clients and networks, so this is more specific if you're looking for Wi-Fi networks. You can see all these here. Otherwise, you can look under clients, and hopefully it knows the manufacturer type. So here you can see we have a Google device that's a client. That might be a Google phone or something of the sort. This one's made by Intel, Belkin, stuff of that sort. So if I wanted to, say, flag down a very specific MAC address, like if I know this is a Google phone or something, I can just copy that. Known devices is not known yet, so I can go under settings and add a new device. So under here, I'll save that as, I guess, test device. And plug in the BSSID.
Or the MAC address.
Yes.
Yeah, same thing.
If we go back to scanner, it should see the device. So that device is within proximity, and we have fairly strong signal strength, so we know it's relatively nearby.
Yeah, okay, so that's a pretty simple setup to go from like just having an ESP and having a web server separate. Now they're communicating, and they're also able to give you information about the environment, and they're going to update every 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So is there anything else you really need to do to get this set up?
That's pretty much it. The only thing that gets complicated is if you choose to remotely host it, which just involves having knowledge on how to set up basic web hosting. So that's pretty much it.
And what would you recommend? Like, is there a service you'd recommend for people who just want to like try it?
Probably, this is one I use for hosting my own website because it's completely free and you can get through pretty much everything you would need. 000webhost.com has like pretty exceptional and fast web processing for whatever you need.
Sneaky. I like it. Cool. Well, okay, I guess that's pretty much all we need to go over for if you wanted to follow along and try this out yourself. What are some of the limitations of this? Like, I know we discussed some in the beginning, but like, if you were trying to track someone specifically, it's like, okay, like I want to track like one person, then I first need to find their MAC address. But again, there could be some like MAC address randomization that's changing that. It could be a bunch of different people all have access to the same place. Like, what other limitations are there for tracking a specific person?
I think definitely the biggest is going to be MAC address randomization. Pretty much everything we discussed already, that's like the cap of this device's capability. I would say also having to pause every so often to upload the data, that also has like a short period in time in which, just like that transitory period, there might be like someone who passed by and you might have missed that while it has to upload the data, so that could be inconvenient.
Yeah, definitely only having one Wi-Fi card and having to go back and forth between transmitting and receiving is something where you could miss maybe a Wi-Fi device transmitting. And to the point of having MAC address randomization, there's other ways of being able to get around that, like looking for known Wi-Fi networks that the device might be calling out for, or some other things you could do, like maybe tricking them into joining a hidden network or scanning a QR code that automatically joins them to a hidden network. At that point, their phone would be just transmitting packets continuously that all have the same name in them because they're calling out for that hidden network. So you would be able to, even if their phone was randomizing their MAC address, you would still be able to tell they were nearby by just looking for those specific packets calling out for that one network. So there are some ways around this, and really this is a super useful project for anybody who wants to just see what kind of devices are around a specific area. This could be IoT devices, this could be looking for things that aren't supposed to be there. Like if you look through here and found, for example, a new like camera had been set up, like maybe you would want to go check that out and find out, like, you know, why it's there or what it is, depending on the manufacturer, if it's like a Ring camera or a Nest camera or something else that's clearly a camera. So the manufacturer feature is really cool and useful, as well as the ability to tell if there's a device nearby, and if so, you know, kind of generally like, so at this point you were talking about future things. So what would you add to this? Because one suggestion I had was association, so you can know, you know, if it's connected to a particular network.
So it is packets. It's actually parsing for probe requests to determine whether or not it's a client device, as well as some other things. So another feature I'd like to implement is sort of like a Wireshark-esque interface where you can see the data that's coming through. You can see, like, is it an association? Is it a probe request? You can filter for those sorts of things. I think that's pretty much it. Did you have any suggestions?
I just really like the fact that it's so sneaky. I think maybe if there was like some known Wi-Fi networks that your target will join, then being able to pop up like some fake or broadcast some beacons that would like cause them to, you know, reveal themselves might be a way of also getting around some MAC address randomization. But really, like, yeah, MAC address randomization is the problem with this project. But if you're tracking someone's laptop computer or something like that, you know, it's probably not going to be much of an issue, because if this is in a stationary spot, then it's probably going to be fairly consistent. That person comes in, connects to Wi-Fi, whatever, with a device that's trackable. So this is really mostly an issue when it comes to smartphones, because they're so portable and we take them with us so much. So there are other devices that are much more trackable and never change their MAC address, like police body cameras. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah. So that's one thing that never changes its MAC address, but does have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, interestingly enough. But yeah, okay. Well, before we go off on a tangent there, I think that's all we have time for today. Alex, thank you for coming on and showing us this. And if people want to see this project, they can obviously go to the GitHub page or follow you on Twitter at
Alex Lynd.
Very well, very good. Much better than some of our other hosts who have totally random Twitter names. Weird that people can't find them. But anyway, you can always follow me on Twitter at Cody Kinsey. You can see this recording and other great streams on hackingwithfriends.com or the Security Forward channel. And of course, you can also check out our sometimes co-host Killian on his own show on the Varonis brand channel, where he does Threat Update, which will give you a view into what big businesses are doing about cybersecurity attacks and what sort of attacks they're up against. Thanks again, Alex, for coming on, and we'll see everyone next time. Bye.